Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The wind howled through the ruined village, carrying the scent of smoke and blood. Aaron crouched behind a crumbling stone wall, his heart pounding as he watched the band of mercenaries tear through the few remaining homes. They moved with the precision of trained killers, cutting down anyone who dared resist. The village that had once been his home, nestled on the edge of the kingdom, was now nothing more than smoldering ash. He clutched the hilt of the rusty dagger Thalos had given him. The old man says words echoing in his mind. Survival is the only thing that matters. Aaron, when the storm comes, you must be ready. But nothing could have prepared him for this. The sound of footsteps crunching on gravel jolted him back to the present. A mercenary, his face hidden behind a metal helm, stalked toward the wall. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. He was no warrior, just an orphan raised by an old hermit. He had no business facing trained killers. But Thalos had taught him how to survive, and survive he must. With trembling hands, Aaron pressed himself against the wall, his eyes darting toward the narrow alley that led to the wood. If he could just make it there, he might have a chance. The mercenary sun shadow loomed closer, and Aaron's grip tightened on the dagger. The moment the man turned his head, Aaron bolted. "Stop him!" The shout rang out behind him, but Aaron didn't look back. His feet pounded against the dirt path as he sprinted toward the tree. The mercenaries' voices grew distant as he plunged into the forest, the dense foliage swallowing him whole. He didn't stop running until his lungs burned, and his legs threatened to give out. Finally, he collapsed against the trunk of a towering oak, gasping for breath. His hands shook as he wiped the sweat from his brow. He had made it, but at what cost? "Aaron!" The voice was faint, barely a whisper, but he recognized it immediately. Thalos pushing himself to his feet, Aaron stumbled deeper into the forest, following the sound. It led him to a small clearing where the old man lay slumped against a tree, blood pooling beneath him. "No, Thalos." Aaron dropped to his knees beside the old man, his heart racing. "I am here. I am here." Thalos' eyes flickered open, the familiar warmth in them dimmed by pain. You must go, Aaron. They'll come for you." "I am not leaving you," Aaron said, his voice shaking. The old man coughed, blood staining his lips. "Listen to me, you have to know the truth. You were not just an orphan." He reached into his cloak with a trembling hand and pulled out a small ornate emblem, the crest of the royal family. Aaron stared at the emblem, his mind reeling. What are you saying?" "You are the last heir, the son of the storm." Thalos' voice was growing weaker with every word. "It is your destiny to unite the kingdom, to bring peace to a land torn apart by war." Aaron shook his head, tears blurring his vision. "No, I can't. I am no one." Thalos' hand gripped Aaron's wrists, surprisingly strong despite his fading strength. "You are more than you know. The storm is coming. Aaron, you must be ready." His eyes fluttered closed, and his hand fell limp. Aaron sat there for a long moment, the weight of Thalos' words crushing him. He was royal blood, the heir to a kingdom he barely understood. It didn't make sense. None of this did. But the emblem in his hand was real. The blood pooling beneath Thalos was real, and the war raging across the land was all too real. Swallowing hard, Aaron slipped the emblem into his pocket and rose to his feet. He couldn't stay here. The mercenaries would be back, and if what Thalos had said was true, they would be hunting him. He had no choice but to run. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and fear. Aaron traveled by night, hiding in the shadows and avoiding any sign of human life. The war had turned the land into a battlefield, with villages burned and soldiers patrolling the road. Rumors of a mysterious heir, the son of the storm, had begun to spread, and Aaron could feel the weight of those whispers pressing down on him. He didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to be a king or a savior. He just wanted to survive. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It was near dusk when Aaron found himself in a small, abandoned village nestled in the foothills of the mountain. The place was eerily quiet, the only sound the wind rustling through the empty street. He'd had hoped to find some food or supplies, but the village had long since been picked clean by scavengers. As he moved through the deserted town, a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking his path. Aaron's hand instinctively went to the dagger at his belt, but the stranger raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "I am not here to hurt you," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I've been looking for you." Aaron's heart raced. "Who are you?" The woman stepped closer, revealing herself in the fading light. She was tall and strong, with a scar running down the side of her face. Her armor was worn but well maintained, and a sword hung at her side. "My name is Lyra," she said. "I lead the rebellion against Lord Varric, the man who sits on the throne. And you, Aaron, you read the key to everything." Aaron's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." Lyra's eyes softened. "You read the last heir to the throne, the son of the storm. We have been searching for you for years." "I am not who you think I am," Aaron said, shaking his head. "I am just an orphan. I don't know anything about leading a rebellion." Allure smiled faintly. "None of us were born for this, Aaron. But sometimes the storm chooses us, whether we were ready or not." Aaron had no choice but to follow Lyra. Her conviction, her belief in the prophecy, was unwavering. And as much as he wanted to deny it, the emblem in his pocket was a constant reminder of the truth Thalos had revealed. The rebel camp was hidden deep within the mountains, a maze of caves and tunnels that offered protection from Varric's forces. Aaron was greeted with wary glances and whispered conversations as Lyra led him through the camp. These people had risked everything for a cause he didn't fully understand, and now they looked to him as their savior. It was a heavy burden to bear. In the days that followed, Aaron trained with the rebels, learning to wield a sword and navigate the complexities of war. But no amount of training could prepare him for the constant weight of doubt that hung over him. He was no leader. He had spent his life in hiding, surviving on scraps, and avoiding danger. How could he possibly unite a fractured kingdom? The answer, it seemed, would come sooner than he expected. One evening, as Aaron sat by the fire, sharpening his sword, Lyra approached him, her expression grim. "We've received word," she said, her voice low. "Lord Varric knows where we are. His forces are marching on the camp." Aaron's stomach churned. "What are we going to do?" Lyra's eyes were hard. "We fight. We'd then been preparing for this for a long time. But if we were going to have any chance of winning, we need you, Aaron. The people need to see the son of the storm leading them into battle." Aaron swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't ready to lead an army, to risk his life for a kingdom he barely knew. But as he looked into Lyra's eyes, he saw the same conviction that had driven her for years. She believed in him, even if he didn't believe in himself. And maybe that was enough. Aaron stood at the front of the rebel army, his sword heavy in his hand. The wind whipped through the mountain pass, carrying with it the distant roar of Varric's army. From his vantage point, he could see the sea of soldiers marching toward them, an endless line of armor, spears, and daggers. His heart pounded in his chest, every beat a reminder of what was at stake. This was no ordinary fight. This was a battle for the kingdom, for the people who had placed their trust in him. But despite the weight of the moment, Aaron felt strangely calm. The fear that had gripped him for so long was still there, gnawing at the edges of his mind, but it was tempered by something else, determination. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. She had been through countless battles before, but even she seemed tense, her fingers tapping nervously against the hilt of her sword. "They'll reach us in an hour," she said, her voice low. "Once they ray in the pass, we'll have the advantage. The narrow terrain will slow them down, and we can pick them off." Aaron nodded, his gaze never leaving the approaching army. "What about reinforcements? Will the other factions arrive in time?" The hero frowned. "It's all I have to say. Galen said he do bring support from the southern clans, but we haven't heard from him since he left. We can't rely on anyone but ourselves." Galen, the memory of his betrayal still stung. Aaron had wanted to trust him, had wanted to believe that he was loyal, but the mercenary had sold them out, nearly getting them all killed in the process. And yet, in the end, Aaron had spared him, choosing mercy over vengeance. He wasn't sure for sure if it had been the right decision, but there was no going back now. "We fight with what we have," Aaron said, his voice steady. "We don't need to win today, Linnea. We just need to survive." Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "UV change," she said quietly. Aaron didn't respond. He had changed in the weeks since Thalos' death, since learning the truth of his identity. He had been forced to confront a world he barely understood. But with each passing day, he had grown stronger, more confident in his role. He wasn't Tree, the boy who had fled his village anymore. He was the son of the storm, and he would not run from this fight. The minutes dragged on, the tension building as Varric's army drew closer. The rebels moved into position, their weapons ready, their eyes filled with determination. Aaron could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. They believed in him and the legend, and he couldn't let them down. When the first wave of Varric's soldiers entered the pass, Aaron gave the signal. Arrows flew from the ridges above, cutting through the enemy ranks with deadly precision. The narrow path slowed the soldiers' advance, just as Lyra had predicted, and the rebels took full advantage, striking from the high ground and retreating before the enemy could retaliate. But Varric's forces were relentless. Despite the rebels' best efforts, they continued to push forward, their sheer numbers overwhelming the defenders. Aaron fought alongside his people, his sword cutting through the enemy ranks, but for every soldier he felled, 2 more took their place. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, the sound of steel clashing against steel, the cries of the wounded, the roar of the storm that had begun to gather overhead, it all blended together in a symphony of chaos. Aaron's muscles burned, his arms heavy with exhaustion, but he refused to stop. He couldn't stop. Then just as it seemed the rebels would be overrun, a distant horn sounded echoing through the pass. Aaron's heart leapt in his chest. Reinforcement from the southern ridge. A group of horsemen charged down the slope, their banners fluttering in the wind. At their head was Galen, his sword raised high as he led the charge. The mercenary had returned, and with him came the southern clans, an army of fierce warriors who descended upon Varric's forces like a thunderstorm. The tide of the battle shifted in an instant. With the southern clans reinforcing the rebels, Varric's army began to falter. Aaron seized the opportunity, rallying his forces for one final push. Together they drove the enemy back, cutting through their ranks with a ferocity born of desperation. In the midst of the chaos, Aaron found himself face to face with one of Varric's lieutenants, a towering man clad in black armor. The lieutenant swung his massive axe at Aaron, but he ducked under the blow, slashing his sword across the man's thigh. The lieutenant staggered, and Aaron pressed the attack, driving his blade into the man's chest. As the lieutenant fell, Aaron caught sight of Lord Varric himself, seated on a black horse at the edge of the battlefield. The tyrant watched the battle with cold, calculating eyes, his expression unreadable. Aaron knew this was his moment. If he could defeat Varric, the war could end here and now. With a surge of adrenaline, Aaron sprinted toward Varric, cutting through the remaining soldiers that stood in his way. The storm overhead grew fiercer, the wind howling and the sky darkening, as if the very heavens were responding to the battle below. Varric dismounted his horse as Aaron approached, drawing a gleaming sword from his side. The 2 men faced each other in the eye of the storm, the battlefield around them falling away as everything narrowed to this one moment. "You think you can challenge me, boy?" Varric sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You read nothing, a scared orphan playing at being a king." I'm not a king," Aaron said, his grip tightening on his sword, "but I am the son of the storm, and I will bring you down." Varric laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "You read a fool if you think a prophecy will save you." The 2 men clashed, their swords ringing out as they met again and again. Varric was a skilled fighter, his strikes powerful and precise, but Aaron fought with a fury that surprised even himself. Every blow Varric landed only fueled Aaron's resolve, the pain sharpening his focus. As they fought, the storm above them reached its peak, lightning crackled in the sky, thunder shaking the ground beneath their feet. The air was thick with electricity, and Aaron could feel the power of the storm coursing through him, pushing him beyond his limit. In a final, desperate move, Aaron feinted to the left, drawing Varric off balance. He seized the opening, driving his sword into Varric's side. The tyrant gasped, his eyes wide with shock as he staggered backward, blood spilling from the wound. "You can't," Varric's voice faltered as he collapsed to his knees, his strength fading. Aaron stood over him, breathing heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. He could end it here. One final blow and Varric would be dead. But as Aaron raised his sword, something stopped him. The prophecy, the storm, the destiny that had been forced upon him. None of it mattered if he couldn't choose his own path. He wasn't a killer. He wasn't a tyrant. Lowering his sword, Aaron stepped back. It sent over. "Varric, surrender and your life will be spared." Varric stared up at him, hatred burning in his eyes for a moment. Aaron thought the man might accept defeat. But then with a snarl, Varric lunged at him, a dagger in hand. Before Aaron could react, a flash of steel cut through the air. Galen appeared at his side, driving his blade into Varixia's chest, ending the tyrant's life in an instant. Aaron stared at the lifeless body, his mind racing. It was over. The war was over. Galen wiped his sword clean, glancing at Aaron with a raw smile. You were going to let him live. Aaron nodded slowly. He was defeated. He didn't have to die. Galen chuckled, sheathing his sword. You got a good heart, Aaron, but sometimes the storm doesn't give you a choice. The storm overhead began to calm, the winds dying down as the clouds parted, revealing the first rays of sunlight breaking through the darkness. Aaron looked out over the battlefield. The fighting had stopped, and the rebels were beginning to gather, tending to the wounded and mourning the fallen. It would take time to rebuild, to heal the scars left by the war, but for the first time in years, there was hope. He wasn't sure what the future held. He wasn't sure if he would ever truly be a king, or if he even wanted that. But for now, he had done what needed to be done. The storm had come, and Aaron had survived.